This is John Boy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, or perhaps you're listening to this after the fact. We're actually recording this live on Wednesday evening, just a little bit over a week before the draft. And it's finally almost here, Scotty. We just have a week left to go. And I know you and I and many others can't wait for it to happen. The sad thing is, though, once it happens, there's a really long dead period there, right? Where we have 3 months to do nothing, basically.
Yeah, that's right. It's the most boring time of the year for the NFL.
Yeah, I guess we can take vacations and enjoy some time off. But yeah, it's like 3 months there. But right now we have lots to talk about. We did a show last week, and actually there's been some Titans news within this week since we recorded the last show. Tom Gower, formerly of Total Titans, does some work on Football Outsiders. He was on last week, and we talked a lot about the upcoming draft, talk a lot about the state of the Titans currently and where they stand. And since then, we actually ended up releasing Jason McCourty, and we restructured a couple of guys in Denoris Searcy and then Harry Douglas. So I know Tom, even he admitted over on TitansReport.com, which we are the official podcast of TitansReport.com. He talked about there how he didn't really expect that coming. And I can't remember the show we talked about it on, but we talked about it near the end of the year. I asked you and Jamal if he would be on the roster next year. I can't remember what all of our answers were, but then something happened the next week, and I think his playing time really started to dip, and we all three started to kind of see the writing on the wall there. And yeah, so they just outright cut Jason McCourty, and a lot of people in the media, we saw everybody saying, "Oh, well, now it's definitely a corner," when we had kind of already been thinking, they needed a number one corner anyway, because we knew how bad McCourty was towards the end of the year. So I wasn't too surprised by that. I was a little bit surprised by the timing at first, but then when you consider the beginning of the offseason workout. So other than that, not too big of a surprise for me.
I was kind of happy because last week on the podcast I said I didn't believe McCourty was in their plans. They actually started phasing him out, like you talked about, toward the end of
Right.
last year. You could see it coming. And, they like to keep these guys on the roster as long as possible sometimes. I guess better safe than sorry. And once the offseason workouts started coming, and I bet you if we knew the details of the potential rework contract, I'm sure it was insulting to him.
Oh, what they proposed? Yeah. Yeah, apparently they tried to work a deal out with him as well, like they did Searcy and Douglas. And when you look at those two, I mean, we still don't have all the details on the contracts. It was Field Yates who actually had that scoop. And when he initially reported it, Searcy's taken a pay cut in 2017, dropping down from $5.625 million to $3.4 million. And then in 2018, he drops from 6.125 down to 3.8. And then Harry Douglas is almost basically cut in half, 3.75 down to 1.75. And he can make 1.75 back in incentives. And I think Searcy can make $750K in incentives. So, I mean, those are pretty significant pay cuts. And you and I were talking on Titans Report. It makes you wonder, well, if they hadn't accepted these, were they just going to be outright cut? And I think the answer is probably yes.
Absolutely. I mean, if they didn't think that, they wouldn't have taken such massive pay cuts.
Yeah.
And they just saw it happen to McCourty.
Right, exactly. So I think we'd kind of already identified that cornerback was, at least you and I felt pretty strongly that was going to have to be addressed early, because even with the signing of Logan Ryan, I think most people agree he could be a number one, but if you can have him in that really solid number two role to play in the nickel, then that's really where he thrives. So even with McCourty in the mix, I think we all thought that he had kind of been downhill and they were going to need another one. They like LaShawn Sims. I think that's clear. They've talked about how much they like him, but they definitely need a cornerback early. And I think that can kind of kick off our conversation here, because we're a week out, and there's really so many different ways this thing could shape out even now. It's kind of crazy. So the Titans still with the 5th overall pick and the 18th overall pick. That could change. A little bit more on that later. But this cornerback class is so deep. We keep hearing about how they're, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah. I've been listening to so many draft things lately. I can't remember who exactly said it. Pretty sure it was Jeremiah, though, that said there was a guy who told him that he had 35 draftable grades on corners, and in a normal year, it would be more around the lines of about 20. So there's going to be plenty of corners there. Do you think the Titans, do they wait, or do they say, you know what, we need to get our guy, we need to knock this out of the way early here in the first round?
Well, first of all, I think cornerback and wide receiver are the two biggest needs where they have to come away with guys that can play this year. But I also think out of all the positions they really need early, cornerback is probably the one where they could actually wait till the third round if they had to.
Right.
Better players at different positions were drafted in the first round. I mean, they've got McCain and Sims and Ryans, and they need at least two cornerbacks probably added.
Yeah.
But if you got them both in the third round, that would probably be okay, as deep as this class is. Mayock said it was the deepest cornerback class of all time.
Yeah. I think somebody asked last week if we could get a starting corner in round 3. I think we probably can. The hardest part about this, though, for the Titans is, are they willing to take that chance, especially if they don't pick up a second rounder? I think J-Rob would probably feel a lot more comfortable passing on a cornerback early if they had a second round pick. And he's made no secret that he wants one. But yeah, I mean, this draft, when you talk about the early corners, I think everybody's pretty much, Marshawn Lattimore seems to be the top corner, but he's got a big concern about his hamstrings, and he really only performed for 1 year. Then you've got his teammate, Garyon Conley. You got Kevin King up there. Sidney Jones, we had the injury with him, so he's kind of dropped off now. And there's a lot of different ways they could go. So we're going to talk more about our specific predictions later on. But I thought we got a lot of good questions, by the way, over on TitansReport.com. You guys submitted a lot of good questions this week. We're going to try to work our way through those as we go along. But this one question, just wanted to hear our thoughts on the position of need, and we talked about that a little already. It's going to be cornerback. It's probably going to be wide receiver. So who are some guys you see at cornerback that could be good fits that maybe aren't those top guys I just mentioned? And I'll go ahead and throw out one that's kind of been generating a little bit of buzz since we recorded last. Is let's see if I can get this right. Chidobe Awuzie, I believe is how you pronounce his name. And he is known as a very aggressive corner. And I think there was talk this week that he could even go as early as mid-round 1 to the Titans. And I think it was Daniel Jeremiah, actually, who mocked him there to the Titans. So he's one I would keep an eye on. A guy that a lot of fans I've seen love to hate on, Marlon Humphrey. When I watch him, I'm honestly not too excited about him either, but everything I read about the guy says that he has all the physical attributes. He struggles downfield on deep passes, but he's another very physical corner. And I don't know. I mean, I think LeBeau kind of prefers the corners that are more in that physical mode, who can come up and play the run. Now, maybe that's changing where we're going to more man coverage, but those are two I would throw out there immediately as ones that people haven't talked about a lot, but are definite possibilities, even as early as 18.
Kuharski was talking about Humphrey to the Titans a lot, like a month or so ago, and he's kind of cooled off on it. But him and Conley are two that Conley's been talked about more to the Titans, I feel like, lately too. But there's so many. There's just so many. Cameron Sutton. From Tennessee.
Brought him in for a visit. Or no, actually, yeah, let's go ahead and finish that thought, and then I need to correct something from last week and add a few more.
Well, I've seen guys like Cameron Sutton getting drafted at the end of the first round and getting drafted in the third round. So there's so many cornerbacks, it's probably just a question of who each team likes. There's so many to choose from. A lot of these guys could go all the way to the third round that some people think will go in the first.
Yeah, so last week, I think on the show, we actually said that Cam Sutton was a visit. And we went back and looked at the links we had, and it actually looks like he was a private workout. So we removed him from the visit list, and then since then we've actually added a couple more names. The list is sitting at 23 at this point. And forgive me if I'm repeating these because I can't remember which ones we had last time. Brad Seaton is a tackle out of Villanova, I believe, that they brought in actually today for a visit. And Jonnu Smith, a tight end, is another one that they've brought in for a visit. I think we talked about most of these last time. Adoree Jackson and then Chidobe Awuzie, the guy I mentioned, both of those were confirmed as visit. Adoree Jackson's a guy that, man, he is so fascinating because he's electric with the ball in his hands. He's a smaller guy, and I think USC kind of had him doing a little too much, and it was because he was so good with the ball in his hands, so he did a little bit of everything. A lot of what I've been reading on him talks about how he actually improved as a cover corner quite a bit in his most recent season at USC. And we all know how they focused on special teams. I mean, maybe they take him if they somehow get a late round 1 pick or an early round 2 pick. Adoree Jackson could be a guy that you can throw in right away on special teams and then hope that he can keep growing as a corner. I mean, clearly the athletic and the attributes are there with him. But like you said, there's so many corners. It's almost impossible to keep track of all of them. And it's almost certain that when they start coming off the board in round 1, people are going to be saying, what? I can't believe this guy went here. But when you think about last year, we talked about how Eli Apple went so early. It's going to be insane when it comes to these cornerbacks.
One of the scary things with the Titans have the 18th pick, and I think they don't pick again until 83. A lot of the projections of safeties and wide receivers and cornerbacks positions the Titans need are in between those picks. And I think that's one reason Robinson wants to trade down to get into that range, because you don't want to sit there and watch from 18 to 83 all these guys start going off the board.
Yeah, if the run starts and you're not up there, you're in trouble. Yep. And one more guy I'll mention. I mentioned him a little bit already, but Kevin King has been generating a little bit of buzz when it comes to the Titans. Josh Norris mocked him to us. I think it was at 18, one of our 2 picks in his latest mock. And he had a really interesting nugget there. He talked about how the Patriots really value 3-cone times for cornerbacks. And Logan Ryan had a 3-cone of 6.69, and that King's is even better at 6.56. So, and we all know about the past with John Robinson scouting Logan Ryan. Now, that could be a thing with the scheme. It could be a John Robinson thing. Who knows if Dick LeBeau values the same thing. But Kevin King's absolutely a possibility as well. So we're gonna have our mocks up next week. You and I are gonna tease a little bit of that on the rest of the show here, but that's why it's so hard. I was talking to you before the show. I mean, I've changed my mock so many times already because if so much hinges on A, if they make a trade, and B, what that first pick is. Because if they go cornerback early, well, then they may not need to take another one as early as 3, or if they go wide receiver. If they don't go wide receiver at all in round 1, well, then they're almost a lock to take one with one of those 2 third-round picks. So much hinges on that 5th pick and what they do there and then what they do at 18.
Right. I mean, to me, if they don't get one of the big 3 wide receivers, you're really just hoping one of the other guys pan out, because there seems to be a drop off from those 3 to the next tier.
Yeah, wide receivers. I think we've talked about those more than any other on Titans Report, but it really does seem like that is going to be the focus. And I think they almost have to take one in round 1 because of that very reason that you just said. There's kind of I think most people have Mike Williams, Corey Davis, John Ross in some order. Those are kind of the top 3. And then after that, you've got guys like Zay Jones, you've got Chris Godwin, you've got Cooper Kupp. I mean, you've got all these other guys that the Titans have shown some interest in on a few of those. But I think they need a number 1, and we've known that for a while. So I think we need to talk about the receivers at least a little bit. And they brought them all in for a visit. those three that I mentioned, and they actually met with all three of them at the combine. So they've showed significant interest in Mike Williams, John Ross, and Corey Davis. Stringfellow, Yancey, Godwin, and Zay Jones were the others that we have as confirmed visits. I think they have to come away out of the first round with one of those guys. If they don't, I think it would be somewhat of a disappointment. Don't you?
Yes, I think the issue is the defense needs upgrading pretty badly, especially the secondary.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, Mariota's going into his third year, and it's time to start giving him some serious weapons. I think they need an outside X receiver, and they need a slot receiver too.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there was a video this week. I don't know if you got to watch any of it. A guy basically put together Mariota's career highlights. I didn't watch the whole thing. I saw a lot of it. Didn't get through the whole thing, but so many people were watching that, and it really just drives home the point of, man, some of these guys, especially the Denver game, I mean, they weren't getting open. A lot of these situations were plays that he was making. Really, the only guy who could consistently get open is Delaney. And we know he's getting up there in age. The other guys, man, I mean, they need someone with speed. They need someone who can, make the routes that Mularkey wants to see ran. And they've got some options in this draft. I don't think anyone would say Williams, Ross, or Davis are elite, but they're pretty solid. And I think I think all three of them have really good potential. I think that's what kind of gets lost in all this, is that people get one guy. Davis has been my guy. People think that, you hate the other two guys. I just think from a fit standpoint, he's always the one that made sense to me. Mike Williams is the one that seems to be getting the most, mostly linked to the Titans in the media. And then John Ross has a real good connection too, because we know they tried to trade for Brandon Cooks. And who does Ross get compared to all the time? Brandon Cooks. So I could see Ross being the guy too.
Their offense is play action based down the field, and they did that last year with Sharp and Wright and Matthews, who came on later. But Sharp is not really a downfield threat at all, and he played the X. And if they kind of, until the very end of the season, they were fourth in the league in big plays in the passing game. I think the last 2 or 3 games they kind of fell back. They're still in the top 10, but they kind of fell back. But they kind of scheme that up with less than ideal wide receivers. And if you can add I would be happy with any of the 3 guys. I feel like Williams is kind of pulling away. At least the perception is he's pulling away from the other 2, and he's also the prototypical X receiver as far as height and everything. But I'd be happy with any 3. If they can get one of those 3 guys in their offense, I mean, they're going to get a lot of man coverage. They're going to get, a lot of potential big plays down the field off the play action passing game. So I just think that would help the offense so much.
Mm-hmm. Any chance at all you think that we get a first round that is just on one side of the ball? Could you see him drafting both defense or both offense?
Yes, I can see both scenarios, and either or. I mean, I've looked at it 1,000 times, and because they can get secondary players in the 3rd round, they can get a safety and a cornerback. And let's not forget, Sims was drafted in the 4th round, so it's not like they couldn't get players even later. But I mean, like to me, the dream scenario would be to get on offense O.J. Howard and Ross, or maybe Davis.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine?
Yes, I mean, your offense, the potential for the offense is just unlimited there. They can line up heavy and run the ball, or they can spread the field out with Walker and Howard, and even Murray. Murray's a legitimate threat outside, and they could just do so much. But at the same time, their defense was Swiss cheese last year, and it's kind of greedy since we have a 5th and an 18th pick, but they need more picks to fill in some of the holes, or else some of these guys we're talking about, like Sharp and Cersei, and Woodard took a pay cut too. Douglas, some of those, if they don't get more picks in the first 3 rounds, they're going to have to rely on some of those guys because
Yeah.
they're not going to be able to fill all the holes.
I'm so excited because it's like you said, when I hear people talk, if you could imagine, I mean, there's a reasonable chance if you took OJ Howard at 5, John Ross might be there at 18. If you could come away with both of those guys, then the offense is suddenly set. I mean, your offense is ready. You might need to still add a slot receiver later, but Ross can play in the slot if you want to keep Matthews and Sharp on the outside. You can move Ross around anywhere, really, probably. The offense would be set, but then you would really be neglecting the defense too. But the offense, that's the side of the ball they really neglected almost completely in free agency. I mean, they did nothing there. It was all about special teams. It was all about the defense. And I think that's why so many people, there's a couple of guys I've talked to on Titans Report and other online places who still don't think they're going to take a receiver in round 1 or a tight end. And that would just be so hard for me to see after the fact that they went all defense in free agency. And that, like you said, defense isn't there. But I mean, they did nothing on the offensive side and talked about how they really want speed. They really need to get better receivers. They've talked about that a ton.
They've also, and giving Mariota weapons and all that. I think they're probably going to take a wide receiver or a tight end in the first round. I think that's pretty safe.
Yeah, I think so. All right. Well, let's talk about the trade scenarios because like a lot of what we're saying here hinges on whether or not they're able to move down. And right now there is so much misinformation. I mean, it's almost impossible to keep track of all the rumors that have been flying around. But I think one thing that's pretty much consistent among a lot of the media guys has been a lot of teams in the top 5 want to trade up, pretty much 2 through 5. And
you mean trade down? They want to
trade down. I'm sorry. Yeah, trade down. Thank you. Yeah, pretty much all those teams are looking to trade down. We got a report from Walter Football today that said the Browns are already talking trade with the Jets to move up to 6 to possibly take their quarterback there. So just the fact that is kind of out there right now, I mean, that's going to get other GMs talking. If Buffalo is really wanting Trubisky, if they're really wanting to get their quarterback, then maybe they say, oh, we need to get up to 5 to get him. So Jacksonville, Tennessee, even San Francisco and Chicago early, and then the Jets at 6. I mean, those are going to be some really interesting spots to see what happens there because usually what spurs trade ups is when teams trade up for the quarterbacks. And this year, I think everybody has acknowledged this quarterback class, we're in kind of a down year. So they've talked them up a little bit later this year, but I feel like they're kind of getting a little last bit of steam here towards the end. I don't know if their agents are doing a lot of work here, but so much of it depends on whether or not a team says, you know what, we need to go up and get our receiver now. A lot of what I've been reading lately says that Buffalo wants to take one early. We've heard a lot about the Browns liking Trubisky. Do you think a trade will happen for the Titans? Because so much of it depends on, if somebody trades in front of us, well, then we're kind of stuck there, right? Because then nobody, unless they have a guy they really want right after that. I don't know. I really go back and forth on it. I think my prediction is that I think they do trade down, but I think they might have to take a little bit less of a value than what people are hoping. How about you?
I think they're definitely going to either trade one of the 2 picks or possibly even trade up from the 3rd into the 2nd.
That's another good point. That's another point that a lot of people haven't mentioned. They do have the 2 third-rounders. So if something just happens where they cannot move down in the first round, they could always try and package those to get back up, because then they would still have 4, 5, 6, and 7 left. They would probably have to get rid of both their third-rounders, maybe a little bit more.
Later in the draft like that, you often see picks from next year given up, like
future, yeah.
They could give up a 2nd or 3rd round pick and still keep both 3rd rounders. I mean, they gave up a 2nd rounder this year.
Right.
obviously to trade up for Conklin. So
Get back up for Conklin.
but he's been a wheeler and dealer, so I expect something. They will probably trade one of the first round picks, but like you said, it may not be for what people. We're not going to get the Rams trade again. People think
right.
That's not going to happen again. It's probably going to be much less. And
yeah, that ties us directly into a question from our buddy Aussie Titan fan 08. He's basically asking, with so many teams looking to trade back, what do you think would be the breaking point? What would be the minimum compensation for us to drop down from 5 or even 18? I think to move down from 5, bare minimum, you got to be offering a second rounder automatically to get up to 5. If it's the Browns, I would push for that 33 pick. And honestly, that would be enough for me. I've seen a lot of people saying they would throw in additional stuff. That would be enough for me, just 33. And then obviously their 12th pick in a deep draft like this. That would be enough for me. But I don't know what Robinson might actually want.
Well, Robinson's openly spoken about a second round pick. I mean, so he definitely wants a second round pick. Now, you might have to settle for an earlier third. I don't know, but they can. Worst case scenario, they can take one of the 5 best players. And I think it was Mike Keith that said first of all, he said he wouldn't be surprised if they traded both picks. But
yeah, I saw that too.
You might remember this, but was it Mike Keith who said he thought the 18th pick would possibly be traded more likely than the 5th pick?
I can't remember if that was Keith. I definitely remember hearing that, though, from somebody. I think it was Keith. I think you're right. Yeah, so if they move down from 18, of course, you're not going to get as much there. I think that one you might have to take a third and, a package of picks that you're sending and they're sending. But then you'd have 3 third rounders. So you could almost definitely move back up into round 2 if you wanted to, even including a combination of future picks. So to move down from 5, I would say bare minimum is a mid to early second rounder. And then for 18, bare minimum would be a third rounder, plus more for that one. But yeah, I think they're really going to try to trade down because it doesn't seem that there's a guy they really just love after. I mean, after Garrett, you pretty much hear everybody say this. After Garrett, there's a lot of guys who are kind of all in the same ballpark from pick 2 to around pick 15 or so.
I think if Lattimore didn't have the injury concerns and the lack of experience, I don't even think he'd last the 5, but he's probably the other big time prospect, but he's so scary.
What do you think? Have any of your thoughts changed about Allen? Because there's, I mean, I think it's kind of 50-50 whether he's there or not at number 5, because it really seems like he's going to slip at least out of the top 3. Maybe Jacksonville takes him. There's a lot of talk about, Coughlin loves his defensive lineman. The thing about Jonathan Allen, I was reading today, and, I talked about last week, I don't love him as a player. I think he's going to be a good player. I'm not sure he'll be great. But the thing about him is everything I've read talks about how his character is just off the charts. And it wouldn't surprise me if he'll sell himself on somebody. But every poll we've done on Titans Report, and I saw today the Reddit Titans Reddit page, they did a poll. They voted Jonathan Allen as well as the Titans pick. That would really shock me if they took him at 5.
It wouldn't shock me because, if you remember back when the season ended, him and Garrett were the 2 players that they were the top 2 players. And he's whether he lives up to it or not, he was a force inside, and those guys are rare. And I know, we talked about Louis Riddick a little bit on the board over the last day or so, and I know he considered Garrett and Jonathan Allen the two premier players. So
yeah, if they consider him that, then yeah, I mean it's a no-brainer that you take him there. And Tom, had a great question. Tom, we had him on last week. He had a great question this week asking what are some of our opinions that have kind of changed as the draft has gotten closer. Let me see if I can find his exact wording here. What have you changed your mind on during the draft process, if anything? Could be team needs, likelihood of drafting a position not related to moves, a player you like less or more. And Jonathan Allen was my transition for this because early on, yeah, I didn't even think there was any chance he would be there. I thought it was pretty much a given he and Garrett would go 1-2. So after I watched him a little bit more, I wasn't quite as high on him. Like I said, I'd be fine with having him, but I just don't know if he's a great player anymore than I originally thought. But I'm an amateur. A lot of guys much smarter than me are saying he's one of the 2 best players in the draft. So I think you got to go with what they're saying. But other than that, early on, I was feeling really strong about possibility of a safety. And then after the Cyprien signing, that changed things. This Cersei news maybe slightly changed things. But I know you want to talk about that too. So let's save that for a second. But what have you changed your opinions about anything as the process has gotten closer to being complete here?
Yeah, probably wide receiver. Earlier, I thought, no way, they've got to fix the defense. But
Oh, that's right. I remember that. Yeah.
I actually think that Mike Williams at 5 is possible. And I actually understand the rationale. It makes sense. The other, you're talking about Jonathan Allen and stuff, and it's one of the biggest needs. He's one of the cleanest prospects that you don't have to worry about whether he pans out or not. Who knows? But if they took him at 5, it would make sense. And I thought that would have been impossible.
Right. I think Tom had a good point last week. I think Williams probably has, and he would probably be my 3rd, honestly, out of Davis, Ross, and Williams. He'd probably be 3rd for me. But I think he has the most easily translatable skill to the next level. Even if Mike Williams is terrible at route running for the rest of his career, he's almost certainly going to be a red zone target that you can just throw up to the corner of the end zone, and he's going to have a good chance to outmuscle a guy and come down with it. That is something that's very easy to kind of foresee and project that he'll be good at that. And that certainly has been gaining a lot of steam about the Titans being willing to take him as early as number 5 even. And I kind of chuckled earlier when you're talking. Some guys on Titans Report posted a news update. Looks like this is from a Jared Tokars, NFL Draft Insider. Haven't heard of him before, but looks like he's got quite a few followers on Twitter. But he had a tweet that went out that said the Titans have met with Corey Davis multiple times per a source. Their 5th pick seems high, but great grab if he's there at 18. And obviously, I don't need any more reason to talk about Corey Davis than I already have. I haven't talked about him as much on the podcast, but I've talked about him a lot on Titans Report. But yeah, I feel like I would be kind of disappointed with Williams at 5, only because I think he's probably there 10, maybe even 15. Eric Galko of Optimum Scouting had a big news drop, whatever you want to call it, this week when he kind of just shared everything he's been hearing. And he talked about Williams possibly going to the Titans at 5, but he said he didn't think any receivers, if he had to guess, would go before like pick 15, which I don't know that I see that, but I just feel like if you could get Corey Davis or John Ross at 18 or Williams at 5, I'm definitely taking the other guys at 18. But like you and I said, like I think we were talking about this before the show, you can't know for sure if you can't trade down. Like I think 10 would be a good spot to trade down. 12 would be a good spot to trade down and take one of those 3 guys. But if that's your guy and you can't trade down, then they may have to go ahead and take him at 5, because it does seem like the consensus is Williams is going first, regardless of who he goes to. Everywhere I read says that he's going to be the first one off the board. So we'll see.
If you think back to the season, when the season was actually going on, I feel like Williams was way the number one guy.
Yeah.
And then as you start doing the combine and looking at 40 times and stuff, I think people have forgotten, he dominated NFL type cornerbacks in
Yep.
college and
on the biggest stage too.
Yeah, so I actually think he's probably deserving of more accolades than he's getting now that the draft process has started.
Yeah.
He's also a very big guy, and remember Robinson said he wants a very big team.
Right.
He's got big running backs, big line, big receivers.
Yeah. And a lot of people talk about the speed. The speed honestly doesn't concern me. The biggest issue I have and biggest worry with Williams is how soon will he be able to improve his route running. We know how much Mularkey talked about that last year, just about how well they run routes. And that's definitely something you can improve on. At Clemson, he was so good that he didn't have to run a ton of routes all the time because he was so good at certain things. So, all right, but jumping back to that safety discussion, though, that I kind of alluded to there, we gave our surprises already. We actually got a little bit of a news scoop on Titans Report this week. It's certainly not something the national guys are going to report on, but one of our trusted members, a frequent member of Titans Report, Mech Titan, had a pretty nice little scoop. Let's see if I can find it here. Mech Titan 53. I'll give him a shout out. But he basically had I guess it was a high school coach at St. Thomas Sports Park. He went to coffee with this guy, and they had a Q&A session with LeBeau and Deshae Townsend. And they were talking about the Titans safety setup and how that they really don't distinguish between free and strong safety anymore, that they just have safeties that can play both ways. And he also added about how Byard they talked to him at the end of the last year about being the leader of the defense. And when I initially read that, I'm like, oh man, well, safety's definitely out at 5. And then the more I thought about it, and then you even posted, well, they can say that all they want, but there's no way you're going to play Cyprien at free safety. I mean, that's Byard. No. Yeah. Byard's flexible. He can do both. And even Cersei, you could argue can do both. I think they actually did use Cersei at both last year, but Cyprien's certainly not a guy like that. So if Jamal Adams is there at 5, he's a guy who is talked about a lot. You mentioned Louis Riddick, talked about a lot for his versatility. This past season, he played a lot closer to the line of scrimmage. Everybody thinks of him as a run stuffer. I think he excels in that area. But the year before that, he was playing back a lot more and had more interceptions that season. He can do both. I don't know that he's going to be as good of a center fielder as Hooker. Riddick certainly seems to think he can be if you checked out those tweets. But if Jamal Adams is there, I'm starting to think again, there's a chance they could take him. And then you have your 4 safeties that the Titans seem to like to rotate.
Right. I mean, the 5th pick, you don't have a chance to get guys like that very often. So if you think Jamal, and honestly, Jamal Adams, I mean, everyone likes Kevin Byard, but honestly, Jamal Adams is a much better prospect than even Kevin Byard. So I know Byard's entrenched in the defense and everything, but the bottom line is there's room for all 3 guys. I almost think that Cyprien's almost not even a safety. He's almost like a linebacker / rover type guy. So he would probably, in a lot of the sub packages, he would probably go in for Woodard. Yeah. And, when they play the Colts are spread out anyway, and most teams are. So you're not going to be in a base 3-4 all the time. I mean, rarely, honestly. So you can, and these guys like Cyprien and Adams, they can still play the run and still cover tight ends and stuff. So I just think that's the way defenses are going. So yeah, you can get all 3 of those guys on the field, and Cersei is not, he's not a guy you want out there in the 3 safety packages if you can upgrade him.
Right. And I did a couple of these draft profiles this year. I didn't get to do nearly as many as I wanted, but people think I talk about Corey Davis too much. I actually think Jamal Adams might be my favorite player in the draft. Just looking at overall his potential, the type of character he has. I mean, I think you and I have talked about this at one point. I mean, he is a John Robinson Mike Mularkey type of player through and through. I've heard some people say he's the honey badger without the character concerns. And if that's what you're getting, I don't care if you have Cyprien or not. Take the guy at 5 and let him and Byard become the leaders of this defense. The thing I was going to say about that draft profile is after I went through and read a lot about his background and watched cut-ups and highlights of him, one of the first things I said, people can go back and find that, is I said, I think Dick LeBeau would be salivating to draft this guy. He just seems like such a Dick LeBeau type of player that I could see him at 5 now. And that's how influx and how crazy this draft is, because I feel like I'm constantly flip-flopping because there are just so many scenarios. And really, I mean, the main goal is obviously improving the team as much as they can for the long term. And I think that it's very possible Jamal Adams could be the better long-term pick than a couple of these other guys. If they pick at 5, I would certainly consider Adams at 5. There's been some talk lately that, hey, people aren't as high on Adams. He might even drop to middle of the first round. I'm like, really? I would be shocked to see that, but that's certainly something that's going around right now. So I don't know if you feel as strongly about Adams, but I would be pretty thrilled if they took him at number 5.
I'm right there with you with Adams. He's probably the safest, and as far as fitting needs, and I think in Alabama, and a lot of people talking about him, he can play in the slot at nickelback.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can do that, I mean, you can really get him on the field a lot more. But I want to
say I even read they actually had him play corner sometimes too. I mean, the guy did everything.
He played in the slot last year for
LSU. Yeah.
LSU, right. I will say this, though. In the second and third rounds, there are a ton of poor man Adams and hookers like Marcus Williams from Utah, Buda Baker, Justin Evans from A&M.
There's May from Florida, I think.
Marcus May. I mean, just a ton of them. And if they don't get Adams at 5, they can still upgrade Cersei in the third round, or maybe the second if they get a second round pick. So it's just there's so many combinations of the 5th, 18th, and 2/3 round.
Changing your mock as we speak, aren't you?
Well, I just realized that there's so many different scenarios.
There really are. It's crazy. If you get that first pick wrong, then your whole mock is going to be off, even if you get the first position wrong.
Right.
But yeah,
right.
I mean, I would love a scenario. Imagine if they could somehow trade down to about 10, pick up a second-round pick, take Adams at 10, maybe he drops a little bit, then get one of the receivers at 18, get your cornerback with that second-round pick, maybe take another corner with one of the third-round picks. I mean, to me, that would be an almost perfect scenario but like you said, there are safeties that it's not quite as deep as corner, but it's still pretty deep that they could get one of those guys in at the top of round 2 or even, middle of round 2.
Or under your same scenario, they get O.J. Howard at 10, they get Corey Davis at 18, and then they get, one of these safeties in the second, and then you take 2 cornerbacks, or you take a cornerback in the second and a safety and a cornerback. I mean, yeah, trading down just opens the door for filling a lot of holes, and the positions they need are pretty deep too. So that works too.
Yeah. All right, let's see. What have we forgotten and not covered here? I'm going to try and run back through some of these questions, try and hit on some things that we missed, but I opened up some other
Well, I'll say something real fast.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something that really interests me is the 18th pick as far as there's always a couple of players that fall further than you think. Like that's how we got Javon Curse. That's how the Buccaneers got Warren Sapp. There's Randy Moss. There's
Keith Bullock we got at the end of round 1.
Right. Well, Reddick, Foster, even Howard, maybe Howard last to 18, who knows? I think you got to wait and see who falls at 18, because I got to be honest, I really like this linebacker Reddick. And if they could
Hassan Reddick, yeah.
Oh man, first of all, he can play inside at the weak side spot where Woodard's at, and then he can play on the pass rush packages I mean, he probably won't last that long, honestly. But even Foster, if Foster lasted that long,
Let me drop you this about Reddick. I don't know. I know you pulled some stats. I don't know if you read into his background. He actually played his first 3.5 years without a scholarship. And he didn't get a scholarship till, I want to say it was like even the last semester or something of his senior. It was like way late in his college career. So, I mean, that guy clearly was a guy who loved football and wanted to do everything in his power. I didn't read more than that. I don't know how he paid for it. If it was, I think actually, you know what? I think it was his mom like took out a loan or something, but don't take my word for it on that part. Definitely look it up and read. But it was just a great story about how he, was so committed to doing it. He does have kind of a little bit of a question mark on his senior year. He was suspended by the team. There was something about a fight at a club, which I don't think he was directly involved in. So that might be something they would definitely need clearance on. Robinson would have to okay. But yeah, I'm right there with you. He's such a guy who you can play him inside. You can rush the passer outside. There's a lot of different things they could do with him. And I've seen him mocked to us by a few guys. I think Zerline had him, but one of his mocks had him going to us at 5 even.
They brought him in, right?
He's Reddick was a visit. Yep.
We're talking about all these needs. It never fails that there's always, in one of the first 2 or 3 picks, there's always a position that no one's expecting. Like Derrick Henry last year, no one thought a running back would go that high to the Titans. Yeah. So it would not surprise me if, like, with the 18th pick, they took someone like Foster or Reddick or, whoever, another position.
Reuben Foster is one of those guys that I don't know where that guy's going to go. I mean, he is a top 5 talent for sure, but he's got the injury questions. He's got the character questions. He's got the learning and kind of mind game on the field questions. It's like you said, if he's there at 18, maybe he's off our draft board entirely. I don't know. But if he's there at 18, talent-wise, I mean, you'd be sprinting to the podium for that guy. But there's a lot behind the scenes that we don't know. So that's what you love about the draft. I mean, you think about last year, this time, we talked about this. Titans had already traded the pick at this point. But 2 weeks prior to the draft, everyone was talking about Laramie Tunsil going number 1. Then they were saying, well, the Titans traded down, but they can still trade up and get Tunsil. Then the night of the draft, he has the whole video fiasco that leaked, and Titans ended up getting what most of us we think was our guy anyway. But there's so much that even over this last week can change. So, all right, let me keep going here through the questions, see if I've missed anything on the thread. Thank you guys for listening live to the Two-Tone Crew. Again, the official podcast of TitansReport.com. And yeah, I think we talked about this one a little bit already. We had a comment from Just a Fan about, we've talked a ton about the wide receivers, not so much about cornerbacks. Yeah, we hit on that one early on. And then we talked about that one with the trades. Yeah, so I think we've hit on almost all these questions. Of course, still plenty more to talk about regarding the draft. So I think you kind of wanted to tease, you and I are both going to do mock drafts. So what we're planning to do is we're going to release these next week. We'll post them on the board and I can list the names, but we're going to release it in audio form. And what I'm going to do, and you feel free to, you can do as little or as much as you want, but I'm just going to give kind of an audio breakdown of each pick. And I'm going to do all 7 rounds. Still haven't decided if I'm going to do trades or not. I think I'm going to have us trading down probably. But so you can look forward to that next week leading up to the draft. And we'll release those on separate days. We might be able to strong arm Jamal and maybe Guru into doing one as well. But those guys are both really busy right now. So I don't know. But definitely look forward to mine and Scotty's mock next week. And then Thursday night, I think what we've decided, we're not going to do a live show, but we should be going live. Well, not a live draft show, I should say. But shortly after the Titans make their final pick, whether it's at 18 or a little bit later, we'll probably be going live, even if the draft is still ongoing. We'll probably go ahead and, because it's going to be pretty late at that point. So we'll go live and maybe talk for half an hour about the pick. And then we're going to try to do the same thing Friday evening and the same thing Saturday evening. And we're hopefully have kind of a rotation of guests. But that's the plan. They'll all go live on YouTube, just like we do this one. And then definitely they'll be posted on iTunes as well. They won't be full episodes, but just kind of breaking down each selection as the Titans make it. So I think you wanted to talk on the podcast tonight just sort of about position groups that you kind of are looking at as we go through rounds 1 through 7 here. So,
I mean, I'll briefly go over it, but honestly, we've broken it down so
yeah, detailed
it's pretty much a combination of, how you want to go after the receivers, cornerbacks, safety. I think I would be interested to know what they think about Spain and Klein. Both of those guys are in the final year. And it would be interesting if one of those guys got an extension. I'd feel a little better. They could actually draft a guard with both of those guys being up next year. And those guys, at least Spain was here before the new regime, so I don't know how they really feel about him fitting the system. Also not talked about very much is the third running back.
Yeah, I was going to bring that one up.
Andrews is gone, and Murray, we're just waiting for the wheels to fall off Murray. That's going to happen. If he makes it through this year, it'd be a minor miracle. So, they definitely at least need a backup for Henry.
I just heard Jamal in my head make a joke about Malarkey running him too much.
Well, he gave him all those carries in Dallas and got all those carries on him, and Malarkey injured him in Philadelphia. So
Malarkey injured him in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and gave him all the carries in Dallas.
Oh, I see. I got you now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree, though. Yeah, they're probably going to take a running back. I don't know if they're going to take. You think they'll look for more of a change of pace back, maybe a smaller speed guy, or do you think they'll look one for more in the mold of Henry and Murray, who could step right in after Murray's gone?
Yeah, I don't really think they are in the change of pace, Danny Woodhead type guys. They seem to like the 6'3", 230-pound sledgehammers.
Right.
Look at all three of the running backs last year. They were all three the same guy. So, although those guys do catch the ball pretty well too.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking, just to kind of break it down here. So you would lean, if you had to guess right now, the first 3 picks in some combination are going to be receiver, safety.
That's exactly what I have. I have, in fact, my first five picks, I have 2 cornerbacks, 2 receivers, and a safety.
Okay.
But I guarantee you that another position is in there that messes that up.
Yeah.
And because I've got an edge rusher later on, I've got a guard, and I've got a running back. Those are my positions.
Yeah, I was going to say about edge, we touched on a little bit, but that's one that if LeBeau likes a guy in 1, he could take him at number 5. If there's a guy he really loves, because you can never have too many of them. We know from his years in Pittsburgh how he loves having his outside linebackers, Arakpo and Morgan, getting up there in age. We don't really know what we have in Dodd. It's totally possible. But yeah, I think on mine, I kind of have them. I think I actually have them taking one in maybe round 3 right now. But we'll see if I change it before next week.
There's a lot of potential edge rushers, McKinley, Watt, Tim Williams. A lot of those guys are around where they're mocked around
that late first, early second.
Yeah, even around the 18th pick, and if they love one of those guys, Barnett, Taco Charles Harris,
yeah, he's been generating a little buzz lately.
And like you said, because to me, if they were to lose Casey, Arakpo, or Morgan, I think they'd be in some trouble.
Yeah.
Unless Dodd shows something pretty special in year 2 that we haven't seen yet. But yeah, they need somebody, a fallback, some depths.
All right, so we got cornerback, we got wide receiver, we got safety as our tees for the first 3 picks. What about, I can hear people now, the next one, the next 2 they're probably wondering about. What about tight end and what about linebacker?
Yeah, to me, the tight end, if they get one of the premier guys like Howard, it makes sense because he's so good. But I actually think they can get by without drafting a tight end this year. They don't have to.
You think Supernaw can step into that Fasano role and be serviceable?
Well, I think they would use, they would use a combination of Kelly and
Yeah.
Super. They used him a lot anyway, but I mean, they don't throw to that guy anyway. They didn't throw the ball to Fasano very much, so they're not trying to hide the fact that they're lining up heavy. They're going to either run it or throw it down the field. So I don't think, and they'll bring somebody in anyway. They might even sign a veteran.
Right. Yeah, that's the other component of this, that we do not have to fill every single need in the draft. There's going to be cuts that happen. There's going to be players that come available that you can kind of fill out the back end of that roster, and maybe even find a guy that, I mean, Klein, heck, that was a guy that the Patriots just cut, right? And we picked him up off waivers. So there are always things like that happen that you can step up and make a move to make your team better. And then with Robinson, the guy could make a trade. I mean, he's shown that he is willing to trade players. He traded DGB for Dennis Kelly, and he's traded picks. So we've already seen him in 1 year trade both. And this year we've seen him now show no hesitance in moving on from veterans and getting veterans to restructure. So there's so many possibilities. But yeah, what about linebacker? I mean, with Cyprien potentially kind of stepping into that role on passing downs, I think they like Williamson a lot more than people, maybe the fans like him. And then Woodyard's there. He's still serviceable. So that's one of those spots, kind of like Cersei at safety, that they could get by with. Right. They could easily upgrade it, but they could get by too.
And people are talking about in the thread, and I like to say it too. Although you draft a few starters early, the draft is mainly for not this year. Henry, Dodd, Austin, these guys were drafted and will probably play more this year and even next year. So I do agree that guys like Jonathan Allen and even Jamal Adams to a degree are Howard, OJ Howard, these guys would be more important in 2018 than they would be as rookies. I mean, face it, rookies struggle. Even the good ones struggle their rookie year a lot. So Robinson's building a team for the future. He's not trying to build at least not with the draft anyway, the best 45-man roster he can for opening day.
Right. So let's end it with this. Give me your 3. Doesn't have to be the 3 best players, but just give me 3 of your. They don't even have to be on your mock, and it can be from any round. Just 3 of your favorite players in this draft. I'll give you my 3, and people know 2 of them already. But Jamal Adams is probably my number 1. Corey Davis, a very close second, and then the other guy is a guy I mentioned last week that if you haven't watched him yet, go online and check him out. He's not even really a sleeper at this point, but the tight end, George Kittle, that dude, I'm telling you, he could step in right away and basically be Fasano. That guy destroys people in run blocking. It's weird. He's not as great when they ask him to kind of stay in and help chip on passing downs, but as a run blocker, he mauls people. So certainly not the best 3 players in the draft, but they're 3 of my personal favorites.
Obviously, I'm not even going to count Garrett because he's going number 1, so I won't even count him. I'm with you, Jamal Adams, OJ Howard, and a guy possibly in the mid rounds that I've talked about is Jordan Lewis, the cornerback.
There you go.
That guy, the Titans are going to man coverage. That guy was a lockdown man coverage cornerback, and he didn't run a great 40 time, and he's not very big, but man, he can cover.
And they might be able to get him on a little bit cheaper than expected too, given the. And again, that's one of those things with his. I think it was a domestic violence issue. He would have to have, Robinson would have to okay that. They would have to clear that behind the scenes. But if he passes their test, then that's a guy that you could potentially be able to get for a much better value than normal if he hadn't had that. Yeah, I think there's a good chance the Titans come away with at least one of those guys that we just named. We gave 6 of our favorites. I think there's a really good chance at least one of them becomes a Titan. So the next time you hear from us will be next week before the draft. It'll be just a very short audio bite. So mine, I don't expect it'll be longer than 10, 15 minutes of discussion explaining my mock. And then Scotty will have one too. And then Thursday night, the draft will finally arrive. And like I said, the plan is to do a live show somewhat after the Titans' second pick. It might not be immediately after. We'll have to kind of play it by ear and just see how things are going with all of us. And of course, what kind of moves they make. If they move down, then we'll wait until they make the pick. So Scotty, man, I can't wait. It's gonna be a fun week for sure.
Yep, the countdown is on.
The countdown is officially on. So for you guys listening live, thanks so much for tuning in. All your support. Last week's show, one of our most downloaded shows ever. So thank you guys for that. Tell your friends, tell your fellow Titans fans about it. Because, I mean, let's face it, there's really not a lot of dedicated Titans coverage out there. So if you're a Titans fan, definitely share it with others and let them know about us. We're on pretty much every podcast service out there, iTunes, Stitcher, the Google. I can't remember the exact name of it, but we're on that one as well. And leave us a review on iTunes. Leave us a review on Stitcher. So now you can watch these on YouTube as well. If you're watching on YouTube, there's really no visual element to it. It's just the audio pretty much, but you can get them there as well. If that's what you prefer. So check us out. You can also find us. The main website is titansreport.com. There is a Facebook group, facebook.com/titansreport. And also there's a voicemail line, 615-900-0282. Once again, that's 615-900-0282 if you'd like to leave us a voicemail. But other than that, guys, have fun. Looking forward to this draft. I know we're all ready for it to be here, but it's a very exciting time. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you again very soon.